Welcome to Podio Commentary, where today we're diving into the chilling world of I Saw the TV Glow, the 2024 American horror film written and directed by Jane Schoenbrun. This film, starring Justice Smith and Brigette Lundy-Paine, explores the intense bond between two friends who are drawn into a sinister reality through their favorite television show. With a distinct visual style and deeply resonant themes, I Saw the TV Glow offers a haunting narrative about identity, reality, and the power of media. Join me today as we unravel the layers of this film and discuss its impact on the horror genre. Here today on Podio Commentary. Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Matt Jarbo. Welcome back to another episode of Podio Commentary, where today I'm going to be talking about I Saw the TV Glow, this new horror movie, is how it's being described by A24, and I don't know how they can call it a horror movie under any legitimate pretense. However, looking at the context of the film, the themes of which it's trying to explore and everything else, I mean, yeah, maybe, sure, if you're looking at it through the lens of trans identity, which of course is what the movie is trying to say. I don't like to do these episodes where I just openly smack talk a film, but I don't want to bury the lead with this one. I didn't care for this movie, but I did find it interesting enough to want to talk about. I think it's an interesting idea. I just don't think it's a well-executed concept. And it's one of the biggest problems I have with subversive media, especially on the low-budget indie horror scale sort of thing. I feel like we tend to kind of let filmmakers ultimately get away with really kind of lazy tactics when it comes to narrative building, world building, narrative storytelling, and of course, conclusions that are not just, I don't know, like hand-washy away. And yeah, I'm going to catch a lot of crap for criticizing the conclusion to this movie right off the bat. But that being said, it was interesting enough to sit through. But halfway through the movie, I found myself tuning out, at least for a minute here, a minute there. I just kept waiting for the next thing to happen, waiting for the next beat to hit, waiting for something interesting to take place. Because this movie kind of operates on the fringes. And that is one of the things that they're obviously going for. The director, Jane Schoenbrun, who I think identifies as they, them. I mean, this movie is very deeply rooted in the trans experience. It's very deeply rooted in the idea of being closeted. Let me just kind of go into it here because I don't want to attack it or nothing like that, really, to be fair. I went into this movie having not seen a trailer and ultimately not knowing really anything about the movie as a whole. It's one of those things I'm trying to do now with some films where I know of its existence. It sounds like something I might want to see based upon what marketing material there might be. Like the image of Justice Smith looking at the television, it being pink. I Saw the TV Glow, has kind of a 90s aesthetic to it to an extent. Catches my interest. And in fact, I was right to follow my instinct on that one because the movie is heavily inspired by, well, mid-90s television. And I just went in as blind as humanly possible. But within moments of the movie starting, there's no way to not know what this movie's about when you understand the color scheme of the trans flag. And so I was like, oh, okay, it's a trans allegory. Much like The Matrix in regards to, but definitely more on the nose. Actually, to be fair, the way this movie operates is it's not subtle. And I know it's not attempting to be. There's no scalpeling here. It's literally just as blunt, like a hammer, while trying to craft it around a narrative that is meant to invoke emotion. And I think largely fails on that particular front. But the movie was, completed. The movie was published, distributed by A24. It made about $4.6 million theatrical before it went to VOD, where it's going to definitely make more money. Not too sure what the budget on it is directly, but it is definitely low budget. And you can tell. And that normally can add to the aesthetic of something like this, but here, maybe not so much. Now, when we talk about this movie, we have to look at it through the lens of its writer and director. Jane Schoenbrun, started working on this story while I don't want to misgender, so while they were on HRT. And that is something that I think is very, very, very important and poignant to this movie being the allegory for transgenderism. The way that Jane describes this movie is that it's an egg crack. And according to the Wikipedia here, it's a term for the moment in a trans person's life when they realize that their identity does not correspond to their assigned gender. And that Owen's character, played by Justice Smith, his choice to not bury himself alive with Maddy and kind of get out of the midnight, we're going to talk about that, was the ultimate existential crisis and was illustrative of their personal fears of potentially living out their life without having transitioned. And that is something that a lot of people, they're fearful of that. Like they're in the closet. And this is probably who that audience is for. Like I said, none of the themes are lost on me. The meaning of it isn't lost on me. My complaint boils down to the narrative. Now, Jane did discuss this with the New Yorker, and here's a quote that they used. TV glow is about something I think a lot of trans people understand. The tension between the space that you exist within, which feels like home, and the simultaneous terror and liberation of understanding that space might not be able to hold you in your true form. I think many people, even if they are sympathetic to the narratives of biological family estrangement, still want to believe in resolution or restorative reparative work. And I think this does a disservice to queer people who are not in control of whether that work can be done. I mean, obviously the idea here is that you are explaining this allegory for people to find and draw comfort from, which is one of the reasons why I think it's odd to call it a horror film. I think horror is a marketing tactic. I don't think it's a horror movie at all. Nothing about it is frightening. Nothing about it is scary. Nothing about it is even, as weird as it is to say, that interesting. The narrative does just enough to kind of keep you afloat, to keep you wanting it to go from point to point to point to where it gets interesting. But it gets so lost in the sauce so many times that you're just waiting for it to get to the point. And I'm a long-winded individual, and I have a very high threshold for some movies. This one, I was just waiting. I'm just waiting for it to land the plane. And that's something that it did have a lot of trouble doing. So why don't we talk about the story itself? The story of the movie centers around Owen, played by Justice Smith, who is always seen as this odd, kind of aloof child. We first meet him when he's younger, when he's in 7th grade, and he is at his school, the high school, for I forget which vote it was. It was a presidential election. I forget which one. It doesn't even really matter. And he ends up meeting Maddy, who is sitting off in a corner, reading a book about the show, The Pink Opaque, reading an episode guide about this show, her favorite show. Now, The Pink Opaque is probably the biggest, the best way to describe it is it's the weakest part of the entire thing, which might be the point, to be fair. But if you're using it as a way to put the two main characters together for something for them to bond over, I really wish we would have spent more time with it to better understand everything. This is where the world building comes into play. Maddy is reading this, obviously obsessed with this show. The show is very much taking some of its inspiration, probably a fair amount of its inspiration, from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I mean, obviously, you've got the monster of the week. You've got the kind of hardcore, badass chicks kicking ass and stuff. You know what I mean? There's also a fair amount of influence from Erie, Indiana and The Adventures of Pete and Pete. In fact, even the two guys who starred in Pete and Pete even cameo as ghostly neighbors in the movie. I'm trying to remember where they were in the film. I tried even looking up photos of who they were in the movie. I don't remember. I didn't see it the top of my head, but I also never really watched The Adventures of Pete and Pete when I was a kid. That had a lot to do with the fact that I just didn't have cable, right? Like around 19 or whenever, I think it was like 94, maybe. My stepdad decided, we don't need cable anymore. So we just got rid of cable TV. I had to deal with, standard TV channels like a chump. All my friends got to watch South Park and all the cool stuff on Nickelodeon. I had to watch actual Saturday morning cartoons. But anyway, you've got this bond that they're, the awkwardness of Owen's character being drawn to Maddy. And then her talking about this show, the best show ever, the greatest show, her favorite show. And she's like, you got to watch it. It's Saturday night, 10:30 p.m., ends at 11 p.m., right before the TV station starts showing old reruns for old people, which was the thing back in the day. I appreciated that aesthetic because I remember what it was like when the TV stations ran out of shows, when they ran out of things to watch. I remember all of that, I even remember one time where like my grandparents' house had Comedy Central until like 3 p.m. in the afternoon. And then after that until 3 a.m. was like some other channel. It split in the daytime. It was so weird. But that aesthetic, I did enjoy. Setting it in that time period, I thought was kind of cool. I really enjoyed that because I remember, recording TV shows on my VCR, rewatching them multiple times. I could identify with Maddy's obsession with a show. But the show itself, The Pink Opaque, was one where it's like they don't ever explain what The Pink Opaque is. It's the stupidest effing name for a show. I'm sure there is some kind of connection for it. I'm sure there's a reason for it. And maybe somebody can tell me about it. But I just found the concept of it to be like very, very dumb. These two girls meet themselves, or they meet at a sleepaway camp, which, by the way, every time they called it sleepaway camp, I had to cringe a little bit. And that had a lot to do with the fact that there's the horror franchise Sleepaway Camp, and so I don't personally think that is a mistake. I think the name Sleepaway Camp, if you know the ending of the movie Sleepaway Camp, that it deals with a young girl who's really a young boy. So I don't think that was anything that was accidental. I think that was quite purposeful. But that being said, it's also kind of like, it just sounded cringe every time they said it. They meet at this camp, they have a psychic connection, and they help each other fight the monster of the week while in the midnight realm, or not on the psychic plane, sorry. And they're across the other side of the county from one another. And not until the end of the 5th season do they have to meet for the first time since camp. Right? But they're all trying to battle this big bad, this guy named Mr. Melancholy, right? Who looks like the Moonman from the old, McDonald's commercials from back in the day. That's kind of the vibe. Well, I think in many ways, the moon, when you see him, when they're in the psychic plane and they show the moon in the sky, it looks like the old short film, with the man in the moon who gets the missile in the eye. Like, again, that's what I think that they were pulling from. I think that was the design they were going for. It just seemed so stupid. Like, so stupid. And I understand that they're kind of pulling from some of these 90s shows that were on, and this show was on what's known as the young adult channel. So obviously aimed for the tween crowd. But see, I was also, a kid in the mid 90s. I remember Are You Afraid of the Dark? I remember stuff, like the Goosebumps TV series, which was hotly anticipated, by the way, albeit not great, but still hotly anticipated. There is a lot of stuff that was designed for kids that was meant to be fearful, or at least fear-inducing from back in the day, that still had a better aesthetic and better production value than this. And the fact that they said the show lasted till the end of its 5th season tells me that, it's definitely not based in reality. Because a show like that probably wouldn't last past seasons 2. And it seems that since nobody else in the world, except for the Amanda character, watched the show in the town or talked about the show, it was meant to be this obscure thing. It was meant to be this show that they obsessed over, that almost nobody else talked about, that nobody else liked. And a show to go to its 5th season for no one else to really like it doesn't make any sense in the world. So from just the logistical aspect of like a person who looking at the industry, that part kind of caught me off. It just wasn't the most realistic. And I know. I get it. The movie's an allegory. It's not going to be set in the real world. But what strikes me as odd is that Owen's character is clearly loved by the mom, right? But his dad is kind of a dick. He's not a stepdad, but he's a dick. In fact, every male character in this movie outside of Owen's character is a dick. Every male character. The Owen's boss at the movie theater, which then becomes his boss at the Family Fun Center. The dad, Frank, played by Fred Durst of all people. That was really weird. And then even Maddie mentions her stepdad, who's a piece of shit. There is no positive male role model in this movie, which is interesting. I don't think that's like a political message. I don't think that Jane Schoenbrun is trying to say anything necessarily. But when you watch it, you start to realize, there's like no positive male character. And the only positive female character is really Owen's mom, who gets sick and dies of cancer. But I am getting ahead of myself here a little bit. When you first have Owen meeting Maddy and Owen, Maddy telling Owen, you should come over and watch the show. And then he sneaks over there at night and he watches it, and then they go to bed. And then that's really about it for like that time. And then he goes, well, I didn't talk to Maddy. I said no more than 3 words to her, but then she would leave me these tapes of the show. And that's kind of this montage. Like it's like picks up a couple years later. Now it's Justice Smith actually in the character, playing the character of Owen. There's a really great tracking shot as he's walking through the hallway of the school, and all the, the writing like about the episodes and little things here and there to kind of like give you a nice aesthetic of back in the day. Like, oh, the pilot re-aired, so you can finally watch the pilot. And that's one of the things I find to be very odd about this whole thing. These seem to be the only 2 people in the school, really, outside of that Amanda girl, who's no longer friends with Maddy because Maddie's a lesbian and Amanda claimed that Maddy tried grabbing her boob. A plot point to just break up the friendship, but whatever. And then, but again, they never talk about it. He never goes over there again for 2 more years. And that's about it. Like, there's just elements of it where it's like, I know you need to advance time. You need to advance the plot. You need to have them be connected, but it's tangential. There is conflict. There's tension. They're not BFF. They, it felt so awkward to watch. And I'm sure, again, that was the intent, but it's just when we're talking about like world building, narrative focus, trying to get to the point, this movie just starts going everywhere that it can with it. The serpentine around what I view as a proper narrative structure, again, artistic choices. I just found it weird. So they get older, they talk. And again, if you look, right, the clothes that Owen wears are very feminine, right? Color palette wise, he's wearing like a pink sweater, things like that. Later on, when he gets a job working in the movie theater, it's blue for masculine. I feel like that is again, I think that's very, poignant for how the costume design is for the movie. And because all the lighting is very pink and very purple and very kind of light blue and, very trans allegory. they lay it on real thick. So if you know, again, it's just like that's the movie. But I want to focus on the story. Once they kind of reconnect and he goes back over there again, now it's a couple years later. His mom is, dying of cancer, basically. The dad just is not really giving a crap. Again, no positive male role model. They go over again. They watch the episode as it airs. And then she, he goes to sleep. She comes down. She's like, I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to leave. And then she draws the little pink opaque Pac-Man ghost figurine on his neck. And then the next morning, like, he freaks out, goes and turns himself in for lying about where he was. And the woman, by the way, who the mother of, I think it was Logan was the name of the boy. The mother actually was the actress who played Tara, as Amber Benson is her name. She played Tara in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So that was a little cameo. There's little cameos here and there, right? Bringing in some of these shows. And again, it's a nice little aesthetic. And then he never sees Maddy again. And then it fast forwards to 8 years. His mom has died. He's living there with his stepdad. And he is working at the movie theater. And then he's driving home. And there's a downed power line. And some papers are strewn about. And this is what I thought was weird. And they didn't really dive into this. It was just kind of a loose thread, I think. But he's looking through these papers. And it's the episode guide that Maddy was reading at the beginning of the movie. And it mentions season 6, episode 1. Like, he mentions that out loud. We never really know more about what that is. We never really find out more about what that whole scene was. Because later on, when Maddy is trying to get him to go back into the ground and to go back into the pink opaque, it's like she mentions to go back into the show to start season 6. It's very weird. It's very odd because she comes back into his life and he's like, where have you been? And she's like, I've been in the show. But first I went to Arizona. And she got a job at the shopping mall. And then she, did that for years. And she's 18, turned 19, 2021, and then she paid a man to bury her alive because she felt like she was Tara from the show and that Owen was really Isabella from the show. And they had drinking Luna juice as after they were captured by Marco and Polo, the very Putty-esque inspired villains. A henchman, really, to Mr. Melancholy, who's the big bad, who we get no information on, by the way. Just that he controls the Midnight Realm. That is apparently, again, an allegory for our world. I don't even know. And then they take out the hearts of Tara and Isabel and put them in a big ass deep freeze industrial freezer where they'll beat basically for eternity. But then they bury the women after feeding them Luna juice. The thing is, there's no context to what any of this shit is. That's my biggest beef. You're going to have a show that goes into the finale, and you're going to have, and that's the whole point of this movie, is to get to this point of where maybe Maddy is Tara, and maybe Owen is Isabel, and they've been trapped in the Midnight Realm. And they are there, and Tara is trying to get Isabel out. And you figure there would be lore dumps in the writing. Like, you figure that there would be, at some point in time, dumping of the lore of the world to maybe jog a memory. And you do that for the character to ultimately reject it, because that's the whole point of Owen's character arc, is to reject it. But for the audience is then given vital information to be able to then have a grander understanding of what the pink opaque is, which I said is like the stupidest name ever, and what Maddy's been up to and why it's important. and things along those lines. But they never did any of that. They just kind of like expect you to fill in the blanks yourself in a way that is just, it's lazy storytelling. It's lazy storytelling. Like I said, the concept was interesting. But you're just waiting and you're waiting and you're waiting. And there's even a scene where they go to this bar on the outskirts of town after Maddy runs in to Owen at the grocery store. And she's like, it's not safe to talk here. We have to go where it's safe. So they go to this bar on the outskirts of town, which apparently is a bar that is referenced in the show, I guess. And there we have like 2 musical performances. This is a 96-minute long movie with end credits. They added in a solid 6 minutes, I feel like, of extra performances in order to pad the runtime to get to that 96 minutes. That really bothered me as just a story watcher, because you stop your story. You've got your 2 leads. They're talking about what, like Maddy's been gone. Owen is like, where have you been? Right? Like there's that. And she's telling him about the show, like come and watch the finale. Remember the finale. Meet at the high school and I'll fill you in. And then it just has the musical performance at both the beginning and ends of that scene. And I just felt that was like such a waste of people's time. Such an absolute waste of people's time. Not that the music was bad. I thought it was okay. But again, I'm just like, get to the point, 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 make it work. Tell me a story. Don't just throw a series of scenes at me and crank the pacing down to net -0 and then and then keep going with it. It's like, it's not even a breathable moment. It wasn't like there was a jump scare and they needed a moment to breathe before continuing the plot. That's the whole thing. Like narrative convention is kind of tossed aside for allegory. And I'm sorry, I think that's so lazy. I think it's so wildly lazy and something that directors shouldn't do. And I know there's the art aspect of it. But the biggest thing you have to remember here is when you have an audience watching this, you want to respect their time. You want to make it so it works, so it flows. So it's something that they can grab onto and that they can then follow through to the end. And hopefully they like it enough to want to watch it again to see the little itty bitty things that they missed that are on the fringes of everything. And this movie definitely has things like that. But it's like watching paint dry at some points in time, which diminish any kind of desire to go back a second or third time. So Owen goes home and starts looking at the series finale, and this is where we get the whole Isabel and, having her heart removed, drinking the Luna juice. And it's also here where they start kind of intersplicing what happened the last night that they stayed at Maddy's house. And Maddy had given Owen what appeared to be Isabel's dress from the show, this purple dress. And they go walking out to the high school football field. Maddy's in leather. Owen's in the dress. And Owen is holding a double-sided battle axe. Right? Like they're doing something. Like they're getting ready to fight Mr. Melancholy or fight the monster of the week or do something. Nothing happens. Right? Nothing happens. I mean, it cuts back to basically like Owen trying to put his head into the TV, and here comes Frank, and Frank pulls him out and then shoves him in the shower while Owen is shouting, "This isn't my home, you're not my father," and then he vomits out Luna juice. Again. Okay. We don't see Frank again after that, right? We don't really see Frank again after that. Because the next night, Owen goes to the school and, Maddy tells him the story. and tries to get him to bury himself out by the high school, out by the football field where no one will find him, in order to then go back into the show, into the Pinko Peg, to start season 6. And then Owen loses his nerve and runs home again. And then the narration kicks in, basically like, I never saw Maddy again. I expected her to show up. She never did. And then it fast forwards 8 years after that. Or no, I think it fast forwards a little while after that. Frank dies of a stroke. Owen stays in the house, saying that he settled down and he starts a family. We never see that family. But in those moments, Owen looks okay. He looks kind of happy. He buys a big TV. I mean, sure, it's probably a whole commentary on consumerism and that is how, people gather around the TV, so to speak, or whatever. And then, like it cuts to 20 years after that. And now, he's working at the Family Fun Center. He's old. His asthma is getting worse. I mean, obviously the idea there is that Isabel is slowly suffocating while being buried alive. And at this particular point, Owen is slowly suffocating. He looks like hell. He has a freak out, like an absolute freak out at the birthday party, and starts screaming for his mother. And everyone just stops what they're doing. They all just stop. And then it basically smash cuts to the boss outside of the bathroom asking Owen if he's all right. We cut to Owen. He's inside, no shirt, but somehow a box cutter. Oh, no, he had the box cutter earlier. And then he stands up and looks in the mirror and he cuts open his chest. Or no, he cuts open his chest while he's sitting on the floor. And then he stands up and he starts opening it. And inside, there's a glowing TV screen inside of his chest. And then he just puts his shirt back on, puts his vest back on, walks outside, and starts making his way towards, I'm assuming, the exit, while apologizing to everybody for the freak out, saying that it's a new medication that he's on. And then the movie ends. That's it. And so obviously the idea, I mean, come on, again, it's not subtle. It's about as obvious as a nuke going off. Maddy went back into the Pinko Peg, and Isabel or Owen stayed in this midnight realm. I just wish I get it. I understand what they're trying to do. I support the message. I just find those kind of ambiguous endings and that kind of ambiguous storytelling to be so completely pretentious that it does kind of turn me off from wanting to watch anything else from this director. And I say the same thing about Christopher Nolan movies, by the way. The first 2/3 of Interstellar are perfect. 10 out of 10. That last act of that movie, bonkers dumb. And it just completely goes another direction for no other real purpose than he just wanted to copy Stanley Kubrick's 2001, A Space Odyssey. And so in this moment, when you're finishing this movie and the credits run, it is kind of, I audibly went, that's it. Like, that's it. And I just kind of sat there and I was like, this movie is dumb. But apparently I'm the only one that said that because it's got good reviews. The audience score is good. The critic score is good. Apparently everyone has told me that it's great. I'm wrong. I don't think that I am, though. I think when you strip away the message of the movie, okay, because you have to do that as a writer, as a connoisseur of media, you have to look at how the media is presented, right? Not what you want it to be, not what it's claimed to be, but what it is. And I feel in this particular case, in this particular movie, what they are trying to do and what they accomplish are like a Venn diagram where it only occasionally works. And for the most part, it's just kind of like, it's scatterbrained. It's almost like an unreliable narrator. And I'm not a fan of that kind of storytelling. Now, will I ever watch this movie again? Honestly, probably not. But look, that has a lot to do with the fact that I didn't really care for it. And the movie, look, and I'll be fair, the movie is not marketed towards a person like me. I'm a cis-het white dude, middle-aged, 2 kids, long-term relationship. Okay. I'm not the target. I don't have any issues with my identity. I know who I am. But for younger people out there, Gen Z, right? Alphas, whatever, who might be feeling a certain way about themselves, the uncertainty of it, of adolescence, of young adulthood, of who they are, I can see this movie as being a good sign for them. When I'm critiquing this movie, my critique has a lot to do with the narrative. And I feel that the narrative is just not good. And in that not goodness of the narrative, that could lose some people who do need to hear the message. Because it comes across as pretentious and egotistical and a little bit of the narcissistic side. And when I think, when you're juggling these kind of stories, having it to be the most accessible, personally, I think is the best way to go about it. But like I said, again, art is art. And if you're asking me if this piece of art made me feel a certain way, it did. And therein, it accomplished its goal. And that's why we talk about it. So I'm curious to know your guys' thoughts on this one. Please let me know in the comment section on YouTube. If you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple, please leave a review. Find me on Twitter at mjarbo. I'll talk to you guys later. Thank you again for listening to this episode of Podio Commentary, and have yourself a great night.